Good afternoon. This is Dyke Hendrickson, and the podcast is Life Along the Merrimack. We meet once a week on Tuesdays, and sometimes it's repeated. We talk for half an hour about the history and health of the Merrimack River. And of course, we talk about Plum Island. Plum Island is a very significant element of the Merrimack River Basin. And so that is something that I've been talking about recently. The other reason we talk about the Plum Island is because I've just written a book about it. The name of the book is Plum Island, A Vulnerable Gem. And so that's what we're going to be doing today, looking at some slides and talking about what is happening at Plum Island and Merrimack River. This is 96.3 FM Joppa Radio. It is Channel 9 local cable TV, and it is on YouTube. What we're looking at now is a house that's been in the news. This is a house on Plum Island, and it was recently overcome by tides and waves. It has been condemned, and people can no longer live in it. This is on about 73rd to 75th Street, and the photo you're looking at is from early fall. The storm that came in about a week or two ago, and it really came up to the second floor, and it destabilized the dwelling. It has been, the parts of it caved in, and the public officials in Newburyport have declared that no one can live there. Other houses are under duress also. I think that's why, it's a very sad situation. And if you're listening on the radio, just be aware that numerous houses on Plum Island are under duress. Curiously, it's coming from the river, not the ocean itself. If you know your geography, you'll know that the South Jetty and the North Jetty, make the parameters of the river. And this house is just above the South Jetty. So they are getting high water from the Merrimack River, not from the ocean. Curiously, the ocean has been bringing back more sand to oceanside homes south of the jetty. This is true. Not everybody knows it, but the homes from, say, around 49th Street, all the way up to about perhaps 60th, part in Newbury, part in Newburyport, are actually getting more sand now. And this is helpful to them because several years ago, they didn't have any sand. And several of them, including one house on 49th Street that I know of, was about to fall into the ocean because so much sand was eroding. But because of the change in the jetties over the last few years, and they were finished in about 2016, the flow and the ebb of the ocean has changed. So there's more sand down from 49th, say, to 60th, and less sand up in 73rd to 77th, which again is on the river, not the ocean itself. So this house we're looking at has been condemned. I'm sorry, that's true. Other houses down there are also under duress, and the water is getting very close to some of the streets down there. So erosion continues. But we do talk about Plum Island in many ways. And here's perhaps a better way of looking at Plum Island. Here's a photo from last summer. You can see people sunbathing. You can see seagulls. And then in the distance, you can see some of the great houses along the ocean. And here, some people don't know as much about the Bayside. This is the Bayside. And this is a very beautiful spot also. It looks to the west. There are beautiful sunsets here, and there are many wonderful homes down here as well. When we talk about erosion, many things have been tried, and here is an example of bags of sand that were brought in to try to hold back the Atlantic. Now, if you were a third party in a distant place, you say, really, plastic bags full of sand to hold back a raging Atlantic? Well, it didn't work so well, as you can see. Now, to the far right, you can see the house that we just looked at, but this shows how far the ocean is coming up and the river, in their case, And so they are under great challenge there. And so these two houses on the left may also have trouble this winter. Again, here is, you can see that, again, this is from the fall, not from the winter. You can see how far the ocean is coming up. Now the river is coming up just north of the South Jetty. And I would mention, people say to me, I live on Low Street in Newburyport. I'm not on the ocean, sadly. But people say, gee, why did they build these houses? Because these houses are relatively new. And one answer is, I was talking to an engineer this fall, and he said, 2 or 3 years ago, when they were thinking about doing this, the river was 200 or 300 feet away. It's just been in the last year and a half or a year that the river has come up so close to the houses, and you can just see, in addition to the one that has been condemned, that's to the right, these other houses are in very serious potential for being hit by the rising water. And here's, for those of you watching, you might know this, a beautiful shot actually from about 2016 or 17. But it shows you what the homeowners are doing along the ocean side. Now, far off, and this to the top of this photo, you don't see any houses. Of course, that's a national refuge there. But in the center here, you can see these homeowners brought in, tons and tons of boulders, and they put it in front of their houses. This is in response to something that happened in about 2015. The winter was awful. It never ended. I think there were 10 feet of snow when you count the snowdrifts. And the ocean was coming so high, these homeowners thought to themselves, if we don't do something, we're not going to have a house in a couple of years. So they did bring in these boulders, and you could see that they are protecting those houses from the ocean. And I will mention, this was not public money, this is private money for those who brought the boulders in. Here's a lovely shot of Plum Island itself. This is the north end, and doesn't look quite tranquil and beautiful. That's the bay side to the right. You can see about a dozen or two boats in there. To the left is the South Jetty. This is a wonderful photo, I've got to say. And I can say it because I didn't take it, so I'm not bragging on myself. This comes from the collection of Steve Atherton. He lives on the island, and one of his avocations is taking aerial photos when he has the opportunity. There's a Charo's fishing boat or tour boat to the foreground. And up into the left center, you can see what we were talking about a moment ago. That's the South Jetty. You can see how the water is coming closer into those houses. And this is really a good illustration of what is happening there. And you can see the city parking lot in the foreground. And then you can see the curve of the beach there. And it shows you that the beach is getting close to the houses. Another wonderful shot. This is taken in 2013, as I believe you can see. And this buttresses the point that I just made. In 2013 or so, so much erosion was taking place. Houses fell off in the Newbury end. And here you can see a photo of a house to the right. And it looks like it's just about to go into the water. It did not. But you can also see sandbars. And this is just a terrific shot of how much erosion was going on at the time, threatening many homes. And then the South Jetty was finished. I think you can still see some people working on it in this, or at least they're looking into it at this point. And things got better for a lot of those houses we see below the South Jetty. Here's an old photo. This is the last of the hotels, the old hotels in Newburyport. This is Oliver House. And it was just a wonderful spot. And that, I think, was taken down in 2016 or 17. This is, of course, a postcard from 100 years ago. It looks like a wonderful spot. It is not on the water, nevertheless. It was actually built in Salisbury in about 1890 and floated across the river. And, amazing things happened in the old days, a century ago. I still wonder about it. Houses were moved along city streets, but, not by trucks as we do now, but by horses and rollers. And here, this situation, this structure was built in Salisbury and floated across the river. So people had energy and ingenuity in the old days, make no mistake. Again, here's a photo of some of the boulders that were put up to protect people from the ocean. This is the ocean side, of course. And that groin that you see, it's called a groin. It's a lot of rocks built up. That is now, as I understand it, below the water. Again, what I'm saying is the water is coming higher. There's more sand. And to my understanding, you can't see that groin. And that is not the one that is where the parking lot is and where the snack bar is. This is another one. So I'm going to go down when it gets a little warmer and make sure my facts are straight. But people live down there and say, well, the sand has come up, the water's come up, and that groin is no longer visible. Quite interesting. Again, here's a famous house, the tan house with the red roof. That's often seen. It's down on Plum Island. It's close to the parking lot. And again, we see the boulders that were brought in by people 3 or 4 years ago to save their houses. I love this shot. This is Reservation Terrace on the north end of Plum Island. These are birds that come every year. They're swallows, and they're here by the thousands, really. And we've always heard of the swallows of Capistrano, which is in California. Well, these are the swallows of Plum Island, Massachusetts. But a nice shot, and you can see some of the fashionable houses behind it. Another lovely shot of Plum Island, and I'll just talk about it for those who are listening. This is a shot, an aerial shot taken at dawn one morning. Again, Steve Atherton of Plum Island has lent me many photos. That's the North Jetty, the South Jetty, and there's a boat going out at dawn. Really a beautiful shot. This is, we're looking at a photo now of the Parker River National Refuge. This was put several years ago. The parking lot has been there for a while, but they put in a building with restrooms, showers, and it's really very comfortable. You're looking at a long boardwalk, which is very helpful for handicapped people. And then, of course, you can see part of the marsh. And this is a great improvement to this area. The National Refuge actually is the third most popular bird watching public facility in the country. We trail a spot in New Jersey, Cape May, and a spot in Texas. But we're number 3. We got on the podium for the bronze. This is a wonderful shot of Sandy Beach on the very south end of Plum Island. And here is a little more of the Parker River National Refuge. This is an area where thousands of birds come to rest. They come in the spring, and they're resting, they're eating, they're regenerating the brood. Their progeny frequently are born here. And this is a nice shot of the Hellcat section of the refuge. Here's an old photo we're looking at. That's John Smith in the left-hand corner. I put it here now. It seems like it's, you're saying, what is that doing here now and why? Well, this is in my book. I have to, when you're writing a book, you have to kind of indicate when all these things happen. The French, Samuel de Champlain, identified the Merrimack River in about 1605, but the French did not stay. The English did. And this is John Smith, whose name you may have heard, and quite a dapper looking fellow, I've got to say. And this is 1626 when he got here and wrote about Plum Island. Wonderful shots of yellow-legged birds here. This is a wonderful photo. It took me a while to actually understand it because it's a beautiful reflection here, and this is by Matt Poole of the center down the Parker River National Wildlife Center. Here is, a great not a founder, but one of the people who helped make Plum Island work. She gave in 1929, she gave $100,000. Her name is Annie Brown. She lived at Stoneham. She was a bird watcher. She gave $100,000 to save a lot of the what's now the refuge, so that bird watchers and birds could use it. At that time, a few years later, the Audubon Society got into a big fight with the Sportsmen's Association on the North Shore. Now, the sportsmen wanted to use that part of Plum Island to hunt, and the bird watchers, wanted to look at the birds, not kill them. And it was really a big political rub for many years. But finally, there was a compromise. It actually got to President Harry Truman's desk in about 1948 and was finalized. But the National Wildlife Refuge got part of it, about 4,700 acres. The sportsmen could still go hunting on much of the marsh. A lot of people don't know that, but they're still hunting down the marsh for birds. And so Annie Brown was a real important person. Here is what actually Plum Island looks like in terms of a map. For those listening, what we're looking at is a map. It's the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge created this map, and it's in my book, but it's in my book because it's very useful. You can see the Plum Island Turnpike, and of course you can turn left and go to where the houses are. You turn right and you where the gatehouse begins. But here are several of the areas, the overlooks and observations areas of the refuge. And for bird watchers, it's terrific. There's the Plum Island Sound, several hunting areas, which we just discussed. So this is a wonderful map that can really orient people to where to go. And if you're a bird watcher, it really gives an outline of where the parking is, where the birds can be seen, and is a great asset. Here is a wonderful leader in conservation. Rachel Carson is shown here in this photo. She was a native of Maryland. She went to Johns Hopkins. She was a scientist, and she started writing for the Fish and Game Administration in the early 40s. She wrote the book Silent Spring. Now, that came out about 1962. But in 1947, she was here in Newburyport at Plum Island, writing stories about Plum Island, and her goal was to save the black duck. And she kept, here is a black duck. Now, this is coveted by bird watchers, but also by hunters. And so here's another picture. You can see it's a beautiful creation, and they're, wonderful for hunting and wonderful for looking at. And one of Rachel Carson's points, and again, we're going back to the 40s, is, and before the word environmental movement was even out there, she was saying, let's save the marsh, let's save a good part of Plum Island so the birds can come there and nest there. They'll come every year. If we shoot them all, they won't come anymore. So why don't we preserve what we can? Hunters can still go out and shoot in part of the marsh, but if we save part of it just for a refuge for these birds, we'll have them every year. And she was right. The black ducks came back, and people can still hunt. And so Rachel Carson, next to Annie Brown, is one of my great heroes of Plum Island. Here's the Canada geese, a Canada goose family. As we say, there are two parents here. They could be two mothers. It could be two fathers. Who knows? But the picture shows, for those of you listening, two adult Canada geese and their four fledglings. And it's quite a remarkable picture. This is going to be in my new book. And it comes from the Federal Wildlife Service photography. So that's good for me, because I don't have to pay anyone for the photos. I can just say, I can just give them a photo credit. But I love looking at that photo. And here's some more photos of birds down at Plum Island. This is a snowy owl. They used to be quite rare, not so much anymore. But this is taken by Dan Grovac. I love this photo. For those of you listening and not watching, it's a beautiful snowy owl in flight. And of course, it is very white with black striping, but it has very deep yellow eyes. It's quite exceptional. If you saw this in National Geographic, you'd say, boy, what a great photographer. So that was Dan Grovac. He lives on Plum Island, and he is the chairman of the board of the Merrimack River Watershed Council. And he's, that council has been very helpful with the river and with many elements of Plum Island. So you're listening to the podcast, Life Along the Merrimack. I am Dyke Hendrickson, the host. This is 96.3 FM radio, local TV, cable 9, channel 9, and it's also on YouTube. And here's a little plover. We were all little once, and so I love this, a little fledgling plumber. This is Dan Grovac again. And fledglings are those birds. The plovers are the birds who are much protected on Plum Island. Now, last year, there were only about 32 pair, according to the officials down there. But from April through almost to July, there's a time when humans can't use the lower part of the island. And so that makes a lot of people annoyed. But as the officials down at Parker River say, the refuge is number 1 for creatures and number 2 for people. So there's a little plover. I wouldn't say he was hamming it up, but he's certainly not running away from the camera. Quite cute. And here, Canada geese are a great fixture in this community. Here is a sunset on Plum Island, a beautiful spot, as we all know, and Dan Grovac took that photo. There's another shot of Hellcat and the beautiful place. Plum Island has a lot of activities to it. This is kayaking. And this photo is taken, it appears, at high tide. And a couple, kayakers are going out through the marsh. There you can see some salt hay, which has been cut. It's been put up so it doesn't get taken away by a high tide. And they've been doing that for well over 100 years. And that, I mean, taking the salt hay, putting it up into stacks like that. In fact, it's 200 years or more. And so many kayakers go to Plum Island. And I will say that when you come in and just go past the entrance shack, right to the right, across from the parking lot, is the place where you can put in your kayaks. And it's a great situation because you can actually back your car down there, drop your kayaks off, take your car and move it into the parking lot, which is still only, 100 yards away, and you're off to your kayaks. But, the marsh is one of the largest in New England, and it's really a great asset. And so here's some kayakers are going through the marsh. They'll soon get to the Plum Island River. Here is a huge buoy, which is outside of the Merrimack River. And it was taken off its mooring by a huge storm. So you can imagine that it must have quite a bit of force to it if it could move an item like this. This is at dawn, another shot by Dan Grovac. That is just very picturesque. As we say, Plum Island's a great birding spot. Here's a photo taken in early spring of some photographers. They've parked their cars. They've obviously found something to want to take photos of. And there they are getting some images. And as we say, Plum Island is number 3 in the country for bird watching. About 230,000 people come each year and look at the birds. So this is, just a huge avocation for many on the North Shore. Here is a wonderful shot of an osprey. We do have ospreys, many of them around here. And we also have bald eagles now that life is getting better and the river doesn't freeze much anymore. But this osprey photo that we're looking at came from a PBS production, TV production that was out this fall. And it was one of the best things I've ever seen on TV. It was the osprey's whole cycle of life was taken from when they arrived in the spring until when they left in the fall after having their fledglings. Only about 2 in general, maybe 3. But it was taken, all these photos and images were taken in the Connecticut River, not the Merrimack, but nevertheless, they're really dynamic. Here is a couple, they mate for life in general. They're quite diligent about being parents, as you can see. The male comes up a little earlier in the spring and makes a nest and gets some food. The female comes up later and is there and has, her fledglings, and they stay together all summer. And there are several nests in New England have webcams attached to them. In other words, you can see the whole summer of these ospreys by a webcam. And as I say, the PBS special was quite remarkable. Here's the shot of the Plum Island Airport. I put it into my book just because everyone goes past it. It has an amazing history. 1909 it was created, not exactly in this spot. But if you think the Wright brothers were only starting flight in 1903, and Plum Island had an airport in 1909, that is quite remarkable. So we were early to it. The Coast Guard is a major part of the Merrimack River. Here's a shot of a Coast Guard 47-footer in high water off of Plum Island in the Merrimack River. They go out in all sorts of weather. They're always helpful. I did a book several years ago called New England Coast Guard Stories, and this was on the cover. So I'm using it again in my book about Plum Island, in part because they're so essential to the river, because a lot of people don't know much about the Merrimack River. They come in, they miss the tide, or they get caught in the current. And so the Coast Guard is frequently saving people. Also, the Coast Guard was founded in Newburyport. Newburyport is the birthplace of the Coast Guard in 1790. Here's a wonderful shot of sunset over the Merrimack River, Plum Island. And I think if you live on the North Shore, you've had many moments where you think, boy, this is a beautiful place to live. And so here again is the Merrimack River. You can see parts of Plum Island, and this is the sunset, and it's a beautiful spot. One of the great photos in my book coming up is this of the humpback whale off of Plum Island. Now, it's a bad day to be in Manhattan, or Pogey, as they say, because in this photo, if you happen to be listening, the whale has found a whole school of pogies, and he is rearing up out of the water. The pogies are getting pushed up by the force of it all. And if you were a pogey, it was you better get out of town fast, because this whale was eating these little pogies. This was in the Newburyport Daily News. Dan Grovick took it, and it was quite an amazing photo. This is the last photo of the day. You can see the sun setting on one of the passenger boats that goes out on the Merrimack. And so it's a beautiful spot, and this is a wonderful photo. Dan Grovick, again, took the photo. So that's it. I'm the host, Dyke Hendrickson. This is the podcast, Life Along the Merrimack. We're on Tuesdays, and we're repeated several times, 96.3 radio, Channels 9 TV, and on YouTube. Thank you for being with us. We'll be with you again. We'll be meeting with people. We'll be looking at the river, the Plum Island, and the ocean, everything indigenous to North Shore. Thank you for being with us.